Welcome everybody to today's digital rally and press conference, Our Stories, Our Vote, the Rising New American Electorate. We're gonna go ahead and get started with today's program. The National Partnership for New Americans, NPNA, is a network comprised of the country's leading 41 immigrant and refugee advocacy organizations. We exist to leverage national strategies for full immigrant inclusion. Please welcome the Executive Director of NPNA, Nicole Melaku, who will get us started.
Thanks, Nancy. Welcome everyone to our Digital Rally Voter Registration Day 2020. Today we are joined by first generation or naturalized members of Congress. I'm excited for them to share their stories and the call to action for millions of newly naturalized voters and first-time voters that will cast their ballots this November. You will also hear testimony from a newly naturalized citizen, Cristina Uribe from Colorado, who will share her incredible journey from citizenship and why she'll be voting this November. In the last few years, approximately 5 million immigrants have naturalized since Donald Trump took office. Many of them have naturalized over the last 4 years. Despite the backlog of applications and the voter suppression that we see happening across the country, there are millions of potential new voters who recently naturalized and can play a significant role this November if they turn out, especially in politically important states. Our communities will not be intimidated by anti-immigrant sentiment and instead have applied for citizenship in record numbers, despite this administration's attempt to make that process more expensive, more complicated, and lengthy. NPNA member organizations and other legal service providers have been there to help them through this process and will continue to do so. And now, on Voter Registration Day, we are calling on all naturalized citizens to vote. We are committed as NPNA through our New American Voters 2020 campaign to close the voter participation gap among the newly naturalized. I want to thank Congresswoman Norma Torres for being a congressional lead of this event today and for your vision and leadership in creating the New American Caucus. You'll hear from Congresswoman Torres in just a few minutes. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator for today's event. She's a best-selling author, My Underground American Dream, and Someone Like Me. She was named one of People in Español's 25 Most Powerful Women in 2017, and in 2019, Woman of the Year by the City of Los Angeles. She's a leading voice in the fight for social justice, immigrant rights, and education equality. She was sworn in as an American citizen in August 2014. Her story has a joyful ending, and she fights so more people can say the same. Without further ado, I'm deeply pleased and honored to welcome our moderator for today's call, Julissa Arce.
Hi, thank you so much for holding this space and for asking me to be the host for this incredible lineup of speakers on this voter registration day. I want to share a story with you. On August 8th of 2014, I became an American citizen after 20 years of living in the United States. And a couple of years after that, in 2016, I cast my ballot in a presidential election for the very first time. And I remember standing in line to exercise my right to vote as a new US citizen. And while I was standing in that line, I reflected on just how much it took for that to happen. And I don't just mean all the sacrifices that my family made and all the hardships that I personally endured, but I also thought about all the court cases and all of the protests and all of the changes in the law that had to be made so that I, as a Mexican American woman, could play a role in our democracy. In 1790, and yes, I am taking you that far back, just bear with me for one moment. In 1790, the first Congress of the United States established in the law who was eligible for naturalization. And it said that free white persons of good character who had resided in the US for 2 years were eligible to become naturalized. Those were also the same people that were able to vote, basically free white men. As a Mexican woman, I would not have been able to cast a ballot. And in fact, for the next 162 years, Congress and courts argued about who could become a naturalized citizen based on someone's race. It wasn't until 1952 that Congress asserted that a person could become a citizen of the United States without being denied or abridged because of race or sex or because such a person was married. It's probably worth noting that a woman's citizenship depended on her husband, but that's a topic for another time. Still today, we know that for Black people, for Latino immigrants, including Afro-Latinos and other people of color, it is still more difficult to become citizens and therefore way more challenging to become eligible to vote. For many, a path to citizenship doesn't even exist. So for those of us today who are naturalized US citizens, who had the option to become citizens and who chose the United States as our country, we have taken it upon ourselves to say yes to the responsibility to vote. We are not a monolithic group. Some of us are judges, some of us are members of Congress, as we will hear from many today. Some of us are writers, laborers, lawyers, teachers, factory workers, and so much more. Today, naturalized citizens comprise 10% of the US electorate. That means that 1 in 10 Americans was born somewhere else, but we are still Americans with the right to vote. And despite unprecedented hardships, we have grown in record numbers, with millions of us becoming US citizens. And now we need to take that power of our vote to the polls, because as American citizens who have the right and the responsibility to vote, it is up to us to shape the future of our country. And so today, 230 years after the first US Congress said only white men could become naturalized, all of us new citizens, Black, Asian, Latino, and of every race, I celebrate us. And on National Voter Registration Day, I urge us, newly naturalized citizens who are eligible to vote for the first time, to make that pledge and to register to vote today. As a naturalized citizen, I am voting for all of our fellow immigrants who still cannot vote. So please visit newamericanvoters2020.org to register to vote today. And now I would like to introduce Angelica Salas. Angelica is the executive director of the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, better known as CHIRLA, where since 1999, she has spearheaded several ambitious campaigns that have led to wins in California, such as in-state tuition for undocumented students, establishment of day labor job centers, and driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants. She is president and board chair of Californians for Human Immigrant Rights Leadership Action Fund and executive committee member of the National Partnership for New Americans. After her remarks, she'll be introducing the Congresswoman from California. Bienvenida, Angelica.
Muchas gracias, Julissa. Thank you so much. That is a beautiful, beautiful recollection of our state, of our history in this country, and why it's so important to vote. Especially for us as naturalized citizens. I too am a naturalized citizen of the United States, originally from Durango, Mexico, and it was a proud day when I too raised my hand to take the oath of citizenship. I want to thank MPNA for gathering us today, a National Voter Registration Day. And I want to just tell you, I started at CHIRLA in the 1990s and 1995. When California saw much of the same anti-immigrant behavior seen in the United States today. And the legislation that went with that sentiment, which was Proposition 187, a proposition that was absolutely anti-immigrant and that attacked even access to education by our immigrant children. But what did we do after the passage of this proposition? We went to court, of course, but then what we did is we got organized. Legal permanent residents became citizens. New Americans registered to vote and they voted. And one of those individuals was my mother. Much of the work that has brought California to become a more welcoming state for immigrants today is really has resulted in the participation of new American voters in California. It's remarkable how there's now 5 million recently naturalized citizens in the state of California, even though despite the multiple attacks on citizenship. In California, there's 5.4 million eligible registered voters who are new citizens, and every year we contribute to this national number of 5 million. Chile's Legal Services Department saw a surge of community members wanting to transition from legal permanent residency to citizenship so they could vote, so they could make a difference. However, the citizenship application backlog at USCIS is, from our perspective, a form of voter suppression that will prevent 290,000 people from attending their naturalization interviews and naturalizing, becoming citizens in time to vote for 2020. That is why Chile joined the National Partnership for New Americans and other organizations in suing USCIS and the Trump administration when USCIS was not responding to our FOIA request in 2018. Instead of USCIS being transparent over the last almost 4 years, it has pursued a policy and policy after policy to make citizenship less accessible, more complicated, and yes, more expensive. In its latest attempt, it has in its proposed regulation, it has increased the citizenship application fee from $640 to $1,170 to exclude low-income working class immigrants. This will be effective October 2nd. That is why we sued in federal court and are confident that it is unlawful and these unlawful and anti-immigrant measures will fail. Despite all of these attacks, Chile and MPNA and all the network of legal service providers across the country have fought back. And we have been successful in naturalizing millions. And with our help and with our congressional champions that you will hear from, we are joining together to move forward a legislative agenda and a vision for this country that welcomes immigrants, that includes them as central actors in this democracy. And one of those champions is our very own member of Congress, Representative Norma Torres. She is one of our, what I would call one of our gems, one of our jewels in California. She's originally from Guatemala, and she represents the vibrant 35th Congressional District of California. Representative Torres is the chair of the New Americans Caucus and also the Central American Caucus. She's a member of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus as well. Throughout her career in elected office, Norma Torres has worked to make government more responsive to the needs of the Inland Empire residents. It is my honor to introduce to you our Congresswoman, Norma Torres.
Thank you so much, Angelica, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to start off by thanking all of the advocates and public officials who came together to make this event happen. We could not be here with the leadership of NPNA and Chile. We would not be able to speak to such a wide scope of this very important issue without Representatives Chu, Meng, and Garcia, and Julissa Arce. And we would not be having the impact that we're having today, this National Voter Registration Day, without the brave new American joining us from Colorado and without all of you who are joining us online. As you may have guessed from Angelica's introduction, this is very personal to me. I am a proud naturalized American citizen. When we talk about how daunting it can feel, overwhelming, and even intimidating for someone to take a stand for their convictions in a country that they are new to, I know those emotions firsthand. But what we need to remind our new fellow Americans is this country was built by immigrants. It became prosperous in no small part because of immigrant ingenuity and labor. We call ourselves a nation of immigrants for a reason. And every voice, no matter how recently arrived, is welcome and needed in our democracy. The urgency behind making sure that every new American understands that is real. We are living under a president right now who is trying his best to ensure as few votes as possible are cast. He's doing that in a number of ways. But one of the most disturbing is how he's making it harder and harder to become a naturalized citizen. This COVID-19 pandemic has inflicted harm on our people and our economy, but it became a convenient way for the Trump administration to shut off all naturalization ceremonies. So people who have already completed every step necessary to becoming our fellow countrymen and women, including the test, people who have nothing left to do but repeat a few sentences, were being denied the opportunity to utter those important words. I led a letter in the beginning of May signed by 31 champions in Congress, including all of the representatives joining us today. To demand virtual naturalizations to ensure that these Americans in waiting become Americans by law. While the administration has begun to hold naturalization ceremonies, this remains a major backlog, not just for families left in limbo, but for those voters that deserve, for those votes that deserve to be cast. You can't exercise your voice. You can't cast your vote if they can stop you from ever becoming a citizen. We see the same strategy play out with outrageous fee hikes on numerous immigration-related forms and applications, including an 80% increase in naturalization fees and a $50 charge for asylum applicants. That asylum charge places the United States in the company of only 3 other nations in the world who would stoop so low as to charge an entrance fee to desperate people fleeing for their lives. The rule changes pushed by this administration also do away with fee waivers and exemptions. Once again, anything that they can do to make it harder to become naturalized. I have a bill with Senator Menendez to preserve and expand access to naturalization by making sure these kinds of fees don't price immigrants out from becoming citizens. And I'm working on another bill to push back against President Trump's harmful rules. We must recognize this administration efforts for what they are, an attack on the character of this nation. And we must also recognize that we are not powerless. Trump's trying to prevent us from voting because it is our best weapon against his xenophobia and cronyism. So take it from me, a little girl who was plucked from the violence and poverty-stricken streets of Guatemala and who has gone on to serve my community proudly in the United States. Your vote is your voice. To have it is a privilege, so use it. Thank you. And with that, I'll pass it back to the floor.
Thank you, Congresswoman Torres. So it goes back to Angelica, who will be introducing Congresswoman Chu.
Thank you so much, Nancy. And so I am so happy today because I get to introduce another one of our incredible champions, Representative Chu. And what I really want to say about Representative Chu is that she has been a champion when she was a state representative and now as a member of Congress. We work so closely with her on so many issues. She is there every time we call her, whether it's fighting against family separation, whether it's advancing on immigrant integration, whether it's standing with us with our immigrant youth, she is there. And so it is so wonderful to be able to introduce Congresswoman Judy Chu to talk about these important issues and to really demonstrate why it's so important that our members of Congress remain committed to the full integration of immigrants, the acquisition of citizenship, and also their participation in our democracy. Welcome, Congresswoman Judy Chu.
Well, thank you, Angelica, for that introduction. Thank you for all your incredible work on behalf of immigrants. And to Churla and NPNA for inviting me to speak on today's call. I'm just so happy to be here with my colleagues on National Voting Rights Day to help raise awareness about this most fundamental aspect of our democracy. America doesn't work unless everybody has a voice. But for much of our history, many of us were denied that voice, and we saw what came from it. Blacks were forced to live segregated lives. Women were denied equal opportunities. People like my grandfather were actually prohibited by the Chinese Exclusion Act from becoming a naturalized citizen, mainly so they could not vote. All of these laws and myriad others like them were tools used to silence those who did not have power. And none of those measures would have been possible had we had equal access to the polls. Fortunately, thanks to the landmark Voting Rights Act of 1965, today we have greater equality at the polls and in laws. That is why voting is such an important act that each citizen must participate in. Representation at all levels, the local, state, and federal level, as well as resources, all depend on our vote. Now, according to the US Census, only 53% of the citizen voting age population voted in 2018. While this is an increase over previous years, it actually means that almost half of eligible voters still did not vote. The good news is our communities of new Americans can make a difference. In 2018, both Hispanic and Asian American voter turnout increased by 13%. But this year, our goal should be to get everyone who's eligible out to vote. That's why I was thrilled when I saw a new report published by the National Partnership for New Americans, which said that 3.1 million individuals have become citizens since the election of Donald Trump. These new citizens have the potential to sway the outcome in battleground states like Florida, Michigan, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and so many more states. But we need to make sure they're all able to exercise their right to vote. And that's why all of us need to work tirelessly to ensure that everyone is able to vote early, has language access resources if they need them, and is not discriminated against at the ballot box. The stakes could not be higher. The next administration will set the stage for how we recover from this pandemic, on whether immigrants are treated with respect and dignity in this country, and will play a role in how systemic discrimination is addressed in this country. And it also means more representation in the makeup of the House of Representatives, the Senate, the state legislatures, and the local councils if we get out the vote. So we cannot take this moment for granted. And for those who are not yet citizens, yet are eligible to naturalize, I encourage you to start the process. Now, my mother, she had to take adult school classes. She had to learn English. It was quite an effort, but she did become a naturalized citizen and was sworn in at that naturalization ceremony. And it became one of the proudest days of her life. Not only that, because she became a citizen, she gained access to so many benefits. If you're a citizen, you can go abroad and be able to re-enter the US freely, regardless of how long you were gone. You can guarantee citizenship for your children, even if your child is born in a different country. You can petition family members to join you in the US. And of course, you can have a better life. There are colleges and universities that only give government-issued grants for education to US citizens, a right that permanent residents do not have. And only US citizens get their full Social Security benefits. Permanent residents do not. So on National Voting Rights Day, let's make sure everyone who's eligible has registered to vote. Let's make sure our family, friends, and neighbors all have a plan on how to vote and have the information they need to make informed decisions. Our communities and our futures depend on all of us getting out to vote. So thank you again, and let's get out the vote.
Thank you so much, Representative Chu. Before I introduce our next speaker, I just want to make a quick note that Harris County, Texas Judge Lina Hidalgo unfortunately will not be joining us today due to the flooding happening in Houston and surrounding areas due to Tropical Storm Beta, which hasn't let up yet. We hold all of Harris County in our prayers and hope that they will get through this safely. Judge Hidalgo wishes she could be with us today and sends her best and encouragement to all of us new American citizens to register to vote. And with that, I would like to introduce Representative Grace Meng, who is a first-generation American whose parents are originally from Taiwan. Representative Meng is the first and only Asian member of Congress from New York State and the first female Congress member from Queens since former vice presidential nominee Geraldine Ferraro. Representative Meng is a member of the House Appropriations Committee and its subcommittees on state and foreign operations, Homeland Security, and Commerce, Justice, Science, and related agencies, among others. Representative Meng's track record proves how she's fought to expand opportunities for communities of color, young people, and women. And she has secured resources to help local businesses. Welcome, Congresswoman Grace Meng.
Thank you so much, Julissa. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Grace Meng from Queens, New York. Thank you to Nicole and the whole team from NPNA for inviting me to speak today. I also am so honored to join and recognize my fellow congressional colleagues who are literally some of the brightest and most proactive champions for compassionate immigration in this country and in Congress, and who are fighting every day against the endless injustices that we've seen come from the Trump administration and how they've been inflicted on immigrants and refugees. Today, as you all know, is National Voter Registration Day, and it's imperative that we ensure all Americans, including those newly naturalized, are registered to cast their ballots, and this is no easy task. President Trump, aided and abetted by Republicans, has cast a long and dark shadow across our nation by failing to strengthen voting rights, to ensure that all eligible voters have access to the ballot box, and sow doubt into the legitimacy of our democracy. They have a dystopian vision of our future, and their rhetoric about who counts as an American has poisoned our national conversation. That's why I worked closely with NPNA and Congress members Garcia and Jayapal to create a visionary framework that invests in our immigrants, refugees, and our country. We introduced the New Deal for New Americans Act to strengthen the path to citizenship for immigrants in this country. We reject the Trump administration's actions that undermine our very notion of what makes America great, that we are a nation of immigrants, a beautifully woven tapestry of diversity. And our bill is expansive, and it rejects the anti-immigrant narrative that this administration has pushed from day one. I want to quickly mention a few things that our bill would do. It would establish a National Office of New Americans in the White House to coordinate federal, state, and local efforts to help immigrants and refugees. It would establish a federal initiative on New Americans to coordinate a federal response to address issues that affect the lives of new immigrants and refugees and communities with growing immigrant and refugee populations. It would create an English as a gateway to integration program for organizations that teach English or help individuals prepare for naturalization or earn a GED. And it would promote civic engagement through automatic voter registration of newly naturalized individuals. On this last point, I want to emphasize how important it is to engage our newest naturalized citizens to vote. Becoming a citizen is no easy task, and I thank Norma for her work and her words on this issue. And those who ultimately become one should be proud and enjoy all the benefits that come with it, including voting. But this path to this is not guaranteed, it is not certain. Each state has its own deadline to register to vote, and some states make it easier to accomplish this task than others, and it shouldn't be this way. This is why our bill would provide automatic voter registration of newly naturalized citizens. I believe that this simple step would create a virtuous cycle of civic involvement. We can't simply hope that the barriers to voting will disappear. We must push for this to ensure that all have access and can exercise their right to vote. Thank you once again to MPA and all my colleagues for convening us today on this important and symbolic day.
Thank you so much, Representative Meng. And now I would like to introduce U.S. Representative Jesus G. Chuy Garcia, who proudly represents the 4th Congressional District of Illinois. Prior to his election to Congress in November of 2018, Congressman Garcia was a member of the Cook County Board of Commissioners, where he opposed housing discrimination against disadvantaged communities, raised the minimum wage, and mandated that county employees have access to paid sick leave. He also passed an ordinance ending Cook County's cooperation with Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. Please welcome desde Durango, Mexico, and Chicago, Illinois, el congresista Chuy Garcia.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Julissa, to you and all the folks from NPNA for the invitation and for joining us today on National Voter Registration Day. I'm delighted to be joined by some of my colleagues and other champions for immigrants and new Americans. We know there's so much at stake in this upcoming election, from the handling of the pandemic to jobs, immigration, and other issues we care deeply about. We have a lot to lose or gain after November. The Trump administration's shocking abuses and attacks against immigrants have shaken us to the core. This is our chance to fight back. Every single vote counts. But for immigrant communities, a single vote is more than precious. We're voting for entire communities. As immigrants, we have to remember that our vote is not just for ourselves, it's a vote for those unable to and those without a voice yet. I know this as someone who has become a citizen and inspired my parents to do the same. Becoming a citizen opened doors for me, as it has for many others. In my early organizing years, I realized that my community was not at the decision-making table and did not have a voice. This opened my eyes and convinced me that I had to become a citizen. My parents became citizens after I was first elected because they felt really bad they could not vote for me. Once they became citizens, they had their first opportunity to vote for their son and became ambassadors of citizenship. Today, I reaffirm my commitment to continue working with you to uplift our immigrant voices and our votes, but we cannot do it alone. We need each and every one of you to bring real change that our communities deserve. Pledge with me. Let's make history. We will make our community count in the 2020 census. We will register ourselves and others to vote, and especially those who are newly naturalized. And we will cancel racism and bigotry by making our voices heard at the ballot box this November to change the course of this country and bring justice to our communities. We are ready, si se puede. Sabemos que hay mucho en juego en estas próximas elecciones para los latinos, desde el manejo de la pandemia hasta el empleo, la inmigración y otros temas que nos preocupan. Tenemos mucho que perder o ganar después de noviembre. Los horribles abusos y ataques de la administración Trump contra los inmigrantes nos han estremecido. Esta es una oportunidad de contraatacar. Cada voto cuenta, pero las comunidades latinas, un solo voto es aún más valioso. Estamos votando a noviembre de comunidades enteras. Muchísimas gracias, es un placer. Back to you, Julissa.
Muchísimas gracias, Representative Garcia. Agradecemos sus comentarios. And now I would like to introduce introduce Cristina Uribe Reyes, who came to the US at the age of 2 and lived her early years as an undocumented immigrant. In 2012, Cristina was able to obtain her lawful permanent status, and in 2018, she was able to achieve the milestone of becoming a US citizen. She now works as an immigrant attorney in Denver, Colorado. And in this role, Cristina helps others navigate the system and walks people through the journey of citizenship. Before I bring her on, I would like to encourage you to visit newamericanvoters2020.org for more information on this campaign and ways that you can get involved. Cristina, welcome.
Hola a todos. Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to be on this panel with such an amazing group of new citizens. As you heard, I grew up as an undocumented immigrant in the United States. As a child, I did not fully understand what that meant. I just knew that it was something that we did not talk about. It wasn't until high school that I tried to apply for college and scholarships that I really began to understand all of the barriers that my legal status would present. It is then that I started organizing and that I started to understand the power of a vote. In 2009, I started organizing around tuition equity in Colorado. Tuition equity was a fight for students like myself who were undocumented, but also residents of Colorado, to be able to pay in-state tuition rates, or at least lower tuition rates than international students. That year, I was present when the Colorado Senate voted on a tuition equity bill. The bill was defeated, but I was not. I vowed to be back on the Senate floor one day with a voice. That started my journey to law school and becoming a lawyer. Law school was difficult, but becoming a citizen was even tougher. To get through law school, I needed determination, time, and effort. My success in that journey was completely dependent on me. The road to a green card and citizenship required luck. See, my parents started their green card process for my family when I was 2 years old. 19 years later, when I turned 21, that process was still pending. I aged out of that family petition and could no longer get a green card through that route, or really any other route. But I was lucky. I was lucky to have fallen in love with someone that was a US citizen, and that's how I was able to get my green card. It is the same for many, many immigrants. There are many that don't have a path to citizenship. Are they lucky enough to be picked for a lottery visa? Are they lucky enough to have a family member that's a US citizen or a green card holder that can sponsor them? Are they lucky enough to have been born in a country where the backlog isn't 20 plus years? Are they lucky enough to have qualified for a visa in the first place, to have been able to come to the US? I was lucky. I scored a green card, and the minute that I was able to become a citizen, I did so. As an immigrant, I feel a responsibility to vote, not only for myself, but in the name of so many others that haven't been so lucky. Others like my family members, like my clients. As an attorney, I see what a difference local governments and the federal government can have on immigration policy. In the time that I have been practicing, in the past 3 years, there have been so many changes to immigration policy and law. Honestly, it seems like there's a new change every single week. And the people that are most affected by these changes are those that don't have the ability to vote. So to those that are eligible to register to vote or to become citizens, I encourage you to do so. Your vote matters. Your vote could change someone's immigration luck. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cristina. That was very heartfelt and touching, and I can absolutely relate to every part of what you said. Thank you so much for that. Again, we would like to encourage you to visit our website in order to register to vote and find out more about how you can get involved. We are now moving to the section of question and answer. So if you are a member of the press and would like to ask a question, you can unmute yourself and ask the question that way. So let us know if you have questions right now. You can simply take yourself off mute and ask the question. We do also have some questions from the viewers who are watching on Facebook Live, and we'll be taking some of those questions in just a moment as well. I'll wait one more minute before we take some questions from Facebook viewers.
Hi, this is Annabelle Munoz. I'm with ABC7 here in Los Angeles. You know, it seems like at this point, someone who is eligible to naturalize would not be able to do so in time for the election. But are there still some important upcoming deadlines for those who are eligible or who've already naturalized? And then 2, some practical steps for legal permanent residents who are eligible to naturalize so they can begin that process, and how can those around them also support them in what can be an intimidating process for many?
Yeah, thank you, Annabelle. I'll actually turn it over to Nicole to talk about an important deadline, which is the fee increases for October 2nd. And then I'll open it up to the members of Congress to chime in on the other aspects of your question.
Sure, thanks, Nancy. So as you know, USCIS has increased the citizenship fees, and it's going up significantly on October 2nd. So we're encouraging everybody who's eligible at this moment to submit their application to do so under the current fee structure. We do know that folks who are in the pipeline in the backlogs most likely are not going to be eligible to take their oath ceremony and therefore register to vote by November. And the estimates that we have are there's around 180,000 individuals that are currently in flux. And so we've been working with members of Congress as NPNA to continue to push that backlogs are cleared and that folks can find a way to get people in for their interviews so that they will be able to take their oath on the spot and naturalize. And so there's a lot of ways that you can plug in to our member organizations, including members like Churla, who are on the ground helping to move this process along. So I'll turn it over to Angelica to answer the other part of this question.
Sure. I just wanted to actually make a point around California. So California state law says that if you naturalize, you can register to vote if you naturalize before election day. So in California, if you take the oath of office and registration date has passed, but you became a citizen after the deadline, you can still register to vote. You do have to go to the registrar of your county to do that, but you can. And so I just really want to make sure that for all those new citizens in California, you can cast a vote on election day if you register that day. And that's something that obviously I know Congresswoman Norma Torres knows because she was in the state legislature when that passed. And so, but for everybody else, I think it's really important to just continue to tell our community that they should seek out legal services with their, the many partners of MPNA. It is never too late to start the process for citizenship because elections happen all the time, and participation in voting and all the protections that were actually described by Congresswoman Judy Chu are so important. So we are here to help you. Most of the process is free other than the fee, and even then we have had situations where there have been very generous supporters who have helped folks with the fee for the government. And so I just want to say to everybody, and the message should be, it's never too late to become a citizen, and do it as quickly as you can, especially with all the support you have from National Partnership for Americans and from organizations like Cheer.
Thank you so much. I did just want to add that today is voter registration day, and so we do really encourage everyone to register to vote today. And just to note that in California, we have really amazing laws that allow us to register on the same day, but other states don't quite have the same laws. So in places like Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Indiana, Texas, the deadline to register to vote is coming up on October 5th. And so really encouraging people to register to vote as soon as possible. Don't wait until the last day to register. And you can visit newamericanvoters2020.org, where you can find out when your state's registration deadline is and to be able to register to vote. So there's a lot of really great resources that you can access both in English and Spanish on newamericanvoters2020.org. Now I'd like to, I have a question for Representative Torres, which is, what was your vision with the New Americans Caucus? And do you know how many members of Congress are naturalized?
Yeah, so we have a membership of 12 members that are part of the New American Caucus. And, you know, our vision, all of us together, in coming together and forming this new caucus was really to push back and highlight, you know, all of the positive things that New Americans bring to the table, all of the roles and positions that we hold in our community, the public service that many of us are involved, whether is working for a governmental agency or in the private sector. I think it's important when we have an administration that has utilized immigrants as scapegoats to present ourselves as you know, proud Americans that unfortunately we did not choose where we were born, but we are just as proud as anyone else. Finally, I just want to add a little bit about the folks that are still in the process who might still be thinking about applying for citizenship. Stop thinking about it, do it. I did it as an adult too. I don't know why I waited so long to take that final step, but when I did, I filled out my application and sent it in, and then I signed up. Even though I went to, you know, elementary school, high school, graduated from high school and college here in the U.S., I still signed up at a local church and attended citizenship classes. I wanted to make sure that when I took the test, I was going to be prepared and to be able to answer every single one of those questions and pass it 100% the first time. So you can do that.
Thank you so much. This next question is for Representative Garcia. Representative Garcia, what is your message for people who have never considered citizenship? Why should they take this last and very important step?
Given what we have experienced in our country, especially over the past 5 years, we have a special responsibility to protect the Constitution and to advance an agenda of full rights for everyone in our country. In addition to that, we've now become America's largest minority or ethnic group. So we have to prepare to assume the reins of leadership as our numbers have grown. The corresponding empowerment and civic engagement and becoming a part of U.S. society needs to correspond. This means that gaining the precious right to vote and availing ourselves of it is critical, as we also seek to excel in corporate life, in philanthropy, in higher education circles, etc. So this is a part of a full enfranchisement of our community. The last 5 years, I think, have been most instructive. A lot of suffering on the part of many people, especially in the immigrant communities. So this is a very special time. As America reckons with the popular calls for racial justice. I think our community has a very important role in becoming a bridge and a force that helps bring everyone to feel and to know that their rights per the Constitution are protected and advanced.
Thank you so much for that, Representative Garcia. And Cristina, this next question is for you. The question is, you have such an incredible story. Would you ever consider running for office now that you are a US citizen?
I would. I think, like I said, it was one of the things that motivated me to go to law school, that I one day wanted to be back in front of the Senate. And so it is a possibility at some point for me to possibly run.
All right, you heard it here first.
That's wonderful.
Julissa, she looks rooted and ready.
Yeah, she does, right? I agree. There is a question that I will take, and I would love for anybody else to answer the second part of the question, which is, do we know how many Latinos are eligible to vote this year, and why has there been such a low turnout among folks? Yes, the turnout for Latinos has historically been low in the last election, particularly for Latinas. Only 50% of us voted. And I think that there are a multitude of reasons why Latinos and Latinas don't come out and to the polls and vote. But I really reject the idea that it's because we don't care or because we're not engaged. I think that we need to do a better job of reaching out to Latino voters, and not just every 4 years when there's an election. There needs to be a continued relationship with the Latino community so that we can make the connection between our daily lives and what's at stake at the polls. Because I think too often Latinos feel that what happens in Washington isn't affecting our lives. And as I think the last 4 years have shown, there is nothing more untrue than that, because every day decisions are made in Congress that affect our daily lives. And so I think there's a multitude of reasons, but I do very much think that every single political campaign needs to make a concerted effort every single day of the year to reach out to Latino voters. So I don't know if anybody else has anything else to add to that.
I would just say that it starts at the local, it's at the state and the national level. We have to invest in our community. It means investing and making sure that individuals know that citizenship is an option, and supporting them in their process with citizenship classes. Once they become citizens, that they get the information about quickly registering to vote, and that they get information in every way, in their language, and that really there is an invitation to participate in this democracy. And I think it's beyond campaigns. It's about our Secretary of States that are saying, you know what, I am going to do everything in my power in order for individuals to quickly be able to register to vote and to be included. And so I feel like it's that spirit that we are trying to promote today on National Voter Registration Day, is that we're inviting you. We want you to be part of this democracy, and we at National Partnership for New Americans, as Chirla, as all of us here, we're inviting you to be part of it.
And I'll just add, Julissa, that the bill that Representative Meng described, a New Deal for New Americans, is a part of understanding the need for civic engagement and having the support out there to ensure the successful incorporation of new Americans into all of our society, and certainly as it relates to civic participation in voting, running for office, and participating fully in the democracy. That's why we think it's a wise investment. We also think it will help the rest of the country understand what civic engagement is about, especially young voters who are registering for the first time who have turned 18.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for mentioning that. And I forgot to answer the first part of the question, which is that there are 32 million eligible Latino voters. And every year, 1 million Latinos turn 18 who don't have to go through the naturalization process that we have to go through because they were born in the US. So I did just want to answer the last piece of the question. And this last question is for Nicole regarding NPNA's national report. Do you anticipate that the high rate of naturalizations will continue if the administration changes?
Absolutely. Historically, every time there's a increase in fees, people take that important opportunity to go ahead and naturalize. I know in 2015, we had, as NPNA, a campaign, Naturalize Now, that was going out across the country with former Congressman Luis Gutierrez, where we were encouraging the newly naturalized to vote. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to educate our community on the benefits of citizenship. I think also whatever we're looking at in terms of a potential administration, becoming a naturalized citizen is the #1 way to protect your family from deportation and to petition for your loved ones, right? So they can also begin on a path to citizenship. So regardless of what we're looking at, we know that people will still continue to naturalize, and we know that we have the work ahead to continue to hold USCIS accountable on those backlogs. And so we have our work cut out for us, but we know that our partners across the country will continue to get the community the access to low cost and free legal services. And so we encourage you to visit newamericanvoters2020.org to find an NPNA member organization that can help you. Many of our partner organizations across the country have an extraordinary core of volunteers who are standing by to help people navigate this process. So please, tomar ventaja, and remember that if you are registering to vote, or if you are voting for the first time this election, you are exercising a very important tool in your toolbox to help save our democracy, right? You are not only voting for your future president, but for the Supreme Court, for district judges, for city attorneys, and for folks down the ballot that will make important decisions about your life. And I just wanted to close with one more thing. Latinos care about a variety of issues. New Americans and immigrants or refugees care about healthcare. We care about what our economy will look like post-COVID. We care about education. And so my message to all of the other elected officials watching is to really court and engage immigrant voters, New American voters, and Latino voters, right? We are certainly a force to be reckoned with. And I'll leave you with that last thought of please register and get the word out.
Thank you so much. And just to close, for anybody that would like to give a message in Spanish, would like to give some space, if anybody wants to just say a few words in Spanish for our Spanish-speaking audience.
I'll go ahead. Nomás te quiero decirle a mi comunidad inmigrante que tan importante es que sigan esa esperanza que ustedes llegaron a este país, y eso continúa al hacerse ciudadano. Y después de hacerse ciudadano, no para ahí, sino que hoy es el día para registrarnos. Es una movilización nacional para que toda nuestra comunidad inmigrante, ya que ya son residentes permanentes, que se hicieron ciudadanos, que ahora se registren para votar. Los necesitamos para cambiar esta nación, para que sea más justa, para que nuestras familias estén unidas, para que tengan un mejor futuro, no nomás para nosotros, sino para las nuevas generaciones. Así que hoy, en este día de registración para el votante, le pedimos a usted, participe, únase a esta lucha y por favor vote el 3 de noviembre por su familia y por su nación. Muchas gracias.
And Julissa, I'll just add, para toda la comunidad hispanoparlante en los Estados Unidos, hay que participar en el censo. Solo quedan 8 días para hacernos contar. Estamos luchando para el futuro de nuestros hijos, de nuestras familias, de la gente de la tercera edad. El censo quiere decir recursos para salud, para educación, para todo lo que apreciamos en la vida. No aparece la pregunta sobre ciudadanía o su estatus migratorio. No es tiempo de tener temor, de estar confundido o indeciso. hay que participar en el censo porque nos importa el futuro de nuestra gente.
Muchísimas gracias y muy buen dicho. Pues bueno, muchísimas gracias a todos por acompañarnos el día de hoy. Como yo soy una nueva ciudadana americana, fui undocumentada por muchos años y en cuanto tuve la oportunidad de hacerme ciudadana americana, lo hice porque sé qué tan importante es votar y hacer contar nuestro voto y particularmente por toda nuestra familia que todavía no tiene el derecho de votar. Así es que hay que utilizar nuestro voto para darle una voz a todos los millones de indocumentados, a nuestra familia. Es muy importante. Entonces, les pido por favor que el día de hoy, si pueden, que se registren por votar y como dijo el representante Chuy, que también por favor llenen el censo. Thank you very much for joining us. Please visit newamericanvoters2020.org for more information on how you can get involved. And thank you so much to everyone for joining us today.
Bye, thanks all.